Today we're going to talk about the new Hollow Knight Silksong news that just came out through the new cover story of Edge magazine. Just to mention, excuse the gameplay, I wanted to record some Hollow Knight gameplay for this video and it had been a while. Oof. It had been more than a year since the last update on Team Cherry's Hollow Knight Silksong. Stretch goal turned sequel, Silksong gets its first big blowout preview in the newest issue of Edge magazine. In this video, I'm going to hit some of the general highlights I gleaned from the piece. It is a fascinating read if you're a fan of the Hollow Knight series, with some gorgeous screenshots and art that is worth checking out in full. Also with a ton of little things and detailed descriptions that I won't have time to cover here. Unsurprisingly, the article does not shed light on any release window, but what it does do is provide some insight into the unique design philosophy fueling Hornet's story. This being the premise to many of the new game's additions, it all revolves around Hornet. Several key features have been adjusted or implemented to better fit the taller, acrobatic player character. One interesting thing the developers Ari Gibson and William Peller discovered is how Hornet being taller, quote, changes everything about the game design. Environments expanded along with the camera, as well as an across-the-board upgrade in enemy complexity. Combat is receiving a greater focus over platforming-heavy sections, as the team is challenging themselves to not make simple, Goomba-like enemies. Like Hornet herself, they say the game strives toward a more physical, personalized world, rather than the more magical, ambiguous world of the blank slate knight from the original. Gotta love how the game mechanics fuel the aesthetic design for Team Cherry, that's why their game's so good. Hornet can talk and engage with a robust and mechanically involved cast of NPCs with what seems to be expanded side questing segments. What is listed here is hunt tasks, which deal with defeating certain enemies, or wayfarer quests that require the discovery of some secret location, or your gather quests, which probably are familiar to your average fetch quest. With only screenshots available in the piece, it's hard to quite picture the full scale of the complexity at hand, but the description Jen Simpkins gives these new characters and their behaviors are impressively detailed. They talk about an expanded sense of variety, as Hornet's world is much larger and diverse, working toward the end goal of reaching the Citadel, as they call it, which they compare this goal to that of Castlevania Lords of the Shadow. It's a very vaguely hinted landmark, but it will expand into something much larger when discovered than initially expected, like in that game. This is before the developers cut themselves off prior to revealing too much. That is something to appreciate with this cover story. It goes into the consideration behind certain design decisions, which allows the player to imagine the new possibilities in what ostensibly is a sequel, without giving away too many particular details that could spoil the fun when the game eventually releases. There are many mechanics that are analogous to Hollow Knight, like the rosary beads that take place of the geocurrency. However, the rosary beads have a fun wrinkle, like being able to string them up throughout the environment, sometimes through some vendor with a small fee attached, so when you die the money is in safe hands for you to retrieve upon your return to that area. Instead of soul, Hornet gathers silk from defeated enemies, recovering her health through what they call bind. It is a much faster and powerful heal, recovering 3 masks of health per use. However, filling your bind with silk seems to be a much more difficult endeavor. The faster use was something Team Cherry decided was best for their boss design, not requiring specific elongated pauses where bosses double over to give you a chance to recover your HP. Here, healing is involved in the rhythm of the fight, just another beat to the dance of an intense encounter. Pellin says that this design choice is implemented with the idea being that you spend more time either at full health or almost dead, and the gameplay is kind of snapping between these states. This, I imagine, allows for a more free-flowing, fast-paced, and intense combat, which is something that the first Hollow Knight already excelled at. But I see what they're getting at. With this improvement to healing, the downside to bind is the silk that fills it has various uses outside of its regeneration ability. It is also used for traversal. Hornet can grapple across the map with lines of silk, zooming through the much larger areas, using up this gauge. So silk works as a free-flowing combat mechanic and traversal mechanic. Some strategy will be required in how you best use your slowly filling silk stash. When the article gets into these extremes and relationships or dichotomies is when it is at its most interesting. Team Cherry was careful to distinguish complexity from difficulty, as they are well aware this might be many people's first Hollow Knight game. They want the difficulty to be on par with the original, which honestly could get quite hard itself, so I'm not disappointed. Hornet can do a lot more, not just from the core abilities we've been talking about, but also for a version of charms called tools. The tools of Silksong are more geared toward the lived narrative of the game. Hornet crafting these tools inspired by the enemies she's faced. Encountering an enemy with a throwable pin, for example, is said to aid in Hornet's crafting of a similar tool. However, she adds her own personal touch to each tool she makes. For instance, a red thread is attached to the pin for easy retrieval. The idea of more narratively apt and personable supplements to combat gives charms a better sense of place within the diegesis of Hollow Knight. This type of in-the-weeds retooling and tinkering is exactly the type of design work I loved about the first game. The article talks about animation cancelling and small physics details that the developers can't help but nerd out about. Hornet also has crests she dons and player-suited loadouts, with the particulars on their functions kept under wrapped. It's assumedly more passive combat buff, similar to the charms as well. As we near the game's inevitable release, it was surprising to hear Team Cherry talk about how Silksong has been in development since before the release of Hollow Knight. The mastercraft of world building is the essence of Team Cherry, and it takes time. And Simpkins, in her short time with the game, continuously marvels at Silksong's far loom. The themes and narrative, the lore, while hinted at, like the role that both Silk and Song play, we do learn about NPCs that are like cult-like relationship to the Silk, and you meet them on their pilgrimage. The first Hollow Knight is one of my favorite games ever, so suffice it to say we will be closely following the release of Silksong here. I think I'll leave it at that for this video. Make sure to check out the Edge article, as there are plenty of nitty-gritty details to pour over until we see the game next. And we will be there for it. For all things Hollow Knight Silksong, remember to like, comment, and subscribe to Turnstile.